In the beginning, books bombarded Montag's shoulders, his arms, his upturned face. A book landed, almost obediently, like a white pigeon, in his hands, wings fluttering. In the dim wavering light, a page hung open. It was like a snowy feather. The words delicately painted therein. In all the rush and fervor, Montag had only an instant to read a line, but it blazed as if stamped there with a fierce steel. And then Montag's hand closed like a mouth, crushed the book with a wild devotion, with an insanity of mindlessness, to his chest. Montag had done nothing. His hand had done it all. His hand, with a brain of its own, with a conscience and a curiosity in each trembling finger, had turned thief. Montag knew it. It was madness, suicide, but it also a beginning. Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury. Fahrenheit 451, the temperature at which book paper catches fire and burns. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. With the brass nozzle in his fists, with this great python speeding its venom as kerosene upon the world. The blood pounded in his head, and his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor, playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the tatters and charcoal ruins of history. With his symbolic helmet numbered 451 on his stolid head, and his eyes all orange flame with the thought of what came next, he flicked the igniter, and the house jumped up in a gorging fire that burned that evening sky red and yellow and black. He strode in a swarm of fireflies. He wanted above all, like the old joke, to shove a marshmallow on a stick in the furnace, while the flapping pigeon-winged books died on the porch and lawn of the house. While the books went up in sparkling whirls and blew away on a wind turned dark with burning. Montag grinned the fierce grin of all men singed and driven back by flame. He knew that when he turned to the firehouse, he might wing it himself, a minstrel man, burnt, corked in the mirror, later going to sleep. He would feel the fierce smile still gripped by his face muscles. In the dark, it never went away. That smile, it never ever went away, as long as he remembered. He hung up his black bill-collar helmet and shined it. He hung his flame-proof jacket neatly. He showered luxuriously and then, whistling, hands in pockets, walked across the upper floor of the fire station and fell down the hole. At the last moment, when disaster seemed positive, he pulled his hands from his pockets and broke his fall by grasping the golden pole. He slid to a squeaking halt, the heels 1 inch from the concrete floor downstairs. He walked out of the fire station and along the midnight street toward the subway, where the silent air-propelled train slid soundlessly down its lubricated flue in the earth, and let him out with a great puff of warm air onto the cream-tailed escalator rising to the suburb. Whistling, he let the escalator waft him into the still night air. He walked toward the corner, thinking little all about nothing in particular. Before he reached the corner, however, he slowed as if a wind had sprung up from nowhere, as if someone had called his name. The last few nights, he had the most uncertain feeling about the sidewalk just around the corner here, moving in the starlight toward his house. He had felt that a moment prior to his making the turn someone had been there. The air seemed charged with a special calm, as if someone had waited there, quietly, and only a moment before he came, simply turned to a shadow and let him through. Perhaps his nose detected a faint perfume. Perhaps the skin on the backs of his hand, on his face, felt the temperature rise at this one spot where a person's standing might raise the immediate atmosphere 10 degrees for an instant. There was no understanding it. Each time he made the turn, he only saw the wide, unused, buckling sidewalk, with perhaps, on one night, something vanishing swiftly across a lawn before he could focus his eyes or speak. But now, tonight, he slowed almost to a stop, his inner mind reaching out to turn the corner for him, had heard the faintest whisper, breathing, or was the atmosphere compressed merely by someone standing very quietly there, waiting? He turned the corner. The autumn leaves blew over the moonlight pavement in such a way as to make the girl who was moving there seem fixed to a sliding walk, letting the motion of the wind and the leaves carry her forward. Her hair was half bent to watch her shoes steer the circling leaves. Her face was slender and milk white, and it was in a kind of gentle hunger that touched over everything with tirelessly curiosity. It was a look, almost of pale surprise. The dark eyes were so fixed to the world that no move escaped them. Her dress was white, and it whispered. He almost thought he heard the motion of her hands as she walked, and in the infinitely small sound now, the white stir of her face turning when she discovered she was a moment away from a man who stood in the middle of the pavement waiting. The trees overhead made a great sound of letting down their dry rain. The girl stopped and looked as if she might pull back in surprise, but instead stood regarding Montag with eyes so dark and shining and alive that he felt he had said something quite wonderful. But he knew his mouth had only moved to say hello. And then, when she seemed hypnotized by the salamander on his arm and the phoenix disc on his chest, he spoke again. "Of course," he said. "You're a new neighbor, aren't you? And you must be..." She raised her eyes from his professional symbols. "The fireman." Her voice trailed off. "How oddly you say that. I'd have known it with my eyes shut," she said slowly. "What? The smell of kerosene? My wife always complains." He laughed. "You never wash it off completely." "No, you don't," she said in a way. He felt she was walking in a circle about him, turning him end for end, shaking him quietly, and emptying his pockets, without once moving herself. "Kerosene," he said, because the silence had lent it. "It is nothing but perfume to me." Does it seem like that? Really? Of course. Why not? She gave herself time to think of it. I don't know. She turned to face the sidewalk going toward their home. Do you mind if I walk back with you? I'm Clarisse McClellan. Clarisse. Guy Montauk. Come along. What are you doing out so late wandering around? How old are you? They walked in the warm, cold, blowing night on the silver pavement, and there was the faintest breath of a fresh apricots and strawberries in the air. And he looked around and realized this was quite impossible, so late in the year. There was only the girl walking with him now, her face bright as the snow in the moonlight, and he knew she was working his questions around, seeking the best answers she could possibly give. Well, she said, I'm 17 and I'm crazy. My uncle says the two always go together. When people ask your age, he said, always say 17 and insane. Isn't this a nice time of night to walk? I like to smell things and look at things and sometimes stay up all night, walking and watch the sunrise. They walked on again in silence, and finally she said thoughtfully, You know, I'm not afraid of you at all. He was surprised. Why should you be? So many people are afraid of firemen. I mean, but you're just a man after all. He saw himself in her eyes, suspended in two shining drops of bright water, himself dark and tiny, in fine detail, the lines about his mouth, everything there, as if her eyes were two miraculous bits of violet amber that might capture and hold him intact. Her face, turned to him now, was fragile milk crystal with a soft and constant light in it. It was not the hysterical light of electricity, but what? But the strangely comfortable and rare and gently flattering light of the candle. One time, as a child, in a power failure, his mother had found lit a last candle, and there had been a brief hour of rediscovery of such illumination that space lost its very vast dimensions and drew comfortably around them. And they, mother and son, alone, transformed, hoping that the power might not come on again too soon. And then Clarisse McClellan said, Do you mind if I ask, how long have you worked at being a fireman? Since I was 20, 10 years ago. Do you ever read any of the books you burn? He laughed. That's against the law. Oh, of course. It's fine work. Monday burn Millay, Wednesday Whitman, Friday Faulkner. Burn them to ashes. Then burn the ashes. That's our official slogan. They walked still further, and the girl said, It is true that long ago firemen put fires out instead of going to start them. No. Houses have always been fireproof. Take my word for it. Strange. I heard once that a long time ago houses used to burn by accident and they need a fireman to stop the flames. He laughed. She glanced quickly over. Why are you laughing? I don't know. He started to laugh again and stopped. Why?